So I am trying to get to my instructor 6 o'clock to shoot him with the gun. That's how I win. So one thing I did not take into account, this was December in northern Japan, and the jet that I was flying there had a very powerful engine. I mean, all F-16s have powerful engines, but there's different blocks, different manufacturers, GE, Pratt & Whitney. The thrust is slightly different. So I had learned to fly the F-16 for the previous year in Arizona, mostly over the summer, in an aircraft with a little bit less thrust. Now I get to Japan, it's December, it's like 30 degrees outside on the ground, and I have a more powerful engine.
And the density altitude is in your favor.
Yes, that just performs way better.
Yep.
Young, dumb Michelle at this point, not Mace yet, does not take this into account with her dogfighting game plan.
Welcome to the Crosscheck, the squawk sheet that uncovers the stories, challenges, and careers shaping business aviation today. I'm your host, Rob Hoffman.
And I'm Ian Lum.
Today's show is going to be a fun one. We're joined by Michelle MACE Curran, a former U.S. Air Force fighter pilot and lead solo for the Thunderbirds. She's now a keynote speaker, author, and the founder of Upside Down Dreams, where she helps others confront fear and reach their full potential. MACE, it's an honor to have you with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I love the business aviation industry, so I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Super cool. Well, why don't we just start with the obvious? Tell us about how your aviation journey began.
Yeah, I think a little bit of an unexpected journey to get there. So I grew up in a rural area of northern Wisconsin, actually just a couple hour drive from AirVenture, which is in Oshkosh. But I had no idea that that world existed, even though it was right there. So not a military family, not an aviation family, from a town of about 4,000 people. But I was a very driven kid, so I got really good grades. I was kind of like a rule follower, the preppy kid that just did what they were told and worked really hard in school. So I get to high school and my parents are like, so let's put those good grades to work. We don't have a college fund for you. Let's look at scholarships. And as we explored the different opportunities, Air Force ROTC kind of rose to the top because I didn't want to stay in my small town. I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to be part of something that was exciting. I was also a thrill seeker. I loved roller coasters. I'd gone skydiving. I loved that stuff. And so I didn't want to fly yet at that point, but the Air Force seemed appealing because it sounded adventurous. So I apply for a scholarship. I get one. I go off to Minnesota to the University of St. Thomas. But at that time, my plan was to do 4 years in the Air Force on active duty, which would be what I owed after I got a scholarship. And then I was going to get out and apply to be an FBI agent. That was the plan. My 17-year-old self wanted to be an FBI agent, kick down doors or...
Cool also.
Yeah, now I know that it's a lot of just working on the computer, not so much kicking down doors and doing exciting stuff. But, you don't know what you don't know at that age. So
Yeah.
I go into ROTC, criminal justice major. About halfway through, we visit Tyndall Air Force Base down in Florida. And for the first time, I get to see 2 fighter jets take off up close. So it's 2 F-15s, full afterburner, going out for a training mission. And I just remember how loud it was. And it just like vibrates your whole body and the orange flame coming out the back. And I was just like, holy crap. How do I go do that? It was just like this visceral reaction of excitement. And so it was that experience where I was like, okay, I should have enough courage to put my name in the hat to compete for a pilot slot next year when they ask who wants to do that. So I did that. I ended up getting one. So I graduated with my CJ degree and commissioned as a lieutenant in the Air Force on the same day and went off to pilot training.
That's fantastic. I mean, so obviously the goal was F-15s or fighter jets from the word go, but it's never that simple, is it? Why don't you talk to us about how you ascended through the ranks and actually made it that far?
Yeah, so because this spark of inspiration came from seeing these jets take off, it was very much not just, I want to be an Air Force pilot. It was, I want to be a fighter pilot. But the odds of that happening are just small. So I go off to Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi. I enter undergraduate pilot training with 0 flight experience, literally never an hour of flight instruction.
Goose egg, 0, nothing.
Nothing. I had ridden
Never been behind the controls.
I'd ridden it as a Cessna as a passenger one time, and the pilot was like, here, try to make a turn. and I just, like, turned the airplane. That was the extent of my experience. I knew I didn't struggle with motion sickness because of my love for roller coasters and fair rides and that kind of thing, but as far as, like, actually flying an airplane, understanding airspace and runways and radio calls and systems on the aircraft, 0 knowledge. So I go in, drinking from a fire hose is the only way to explain it. It was aggressive, the learning curve was steep. Very, very early on, I had a few moments where I was like, "Ooh, I don't know what I got myself into. Am I in over my head here?" But because I had kind of just a strong test taking ability and I was good at memorizing things, I was able to work hard enough to overcome that and catch up to people that did have a flight experience or engineering degrees, which were a little bit more useful than mine. And then eventually, it turned out I just kind of took to it pretty quickly. Don't want to say I didn't, I worked my butt off that year. I worked so hard, but I think there was some natural aptitude there as well. Fast forward to drop night, where you find out which airframe you're going to go fly. And I had a class of 25 students. And generally, classes were getting between 1 to 3 fighter aircraft available for 25 people. There were, like, 6 or 7 of us who were qualified, had gone through, like, the right path in pilot training, had done well enough to get one, and I knew I was probably 2nd in that ranking of those people that were eligible, and so it was a lot of holding my breath and waiting, and of course, my instructors knew that I was going to get the F-16, which is what jet I ended up putting first on my wish list. So they screwed with me, and I found out last of 25 people, and they pretended that I was actually gonna stay at Columbus in Mississippi and be a first assignment instructor pilot. Like, they did some stuff on when I was up on stage in front of everyone, friends and family at the officers club, clutching my pint of beer hard enough to burn. Like, I'm worried I'm gonna shatter this glass because 'cause I'm so nervous. Long story
That's a
short.
grade A practical
Yep.
joke, by the way. Kudos to them for
Right, because they
messing
knew.
with you like that.
Yeah, they knew it was gonna work out. That's why it's funny.
Yeah,
If it hadn't worked
exactly.
out, it would just
Totally mean if that's not the case.
Oh, yeah.
for sure. And I found out I was getting the Viper, the F-16, and it was off to the races from there.
But even then, just because you made the cut at that stage, there's still no guarantees that you're going to take it this far. Were there any early moments of doubt or struggle? Was there any place where you thought about giving up?
So many. Um, yeah, so, early in pilot training, I had a few moments of just overwhelm, but they were very brief. It was like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm trying to cram this information into my brain and understand how the electrical system works or how an oil system works, and I'm just like, "This is all new to me, I don't understand it at all." But usually the next day, I would be like, "Okay, I get this concept now, on to the next." As I get through learning to fly the F-16, I start to get a little taste of the tactics that you need to know. It's very much so much more than just flying the airplane. Flying the jet is something you have to do like subconsciously because there's all of these other things you need to handle. And so the physical flying, takeoff, landing, getting the airplane to do what you wanted it to do, I felt like that came fairly quickly. But as I get now to my first combat squadron, which was Misawa, Japan, now you need to be able to learn and execute the tactics very quickly. And that squadron specifically, just based on where it's located, it is like a frontline squadron. You are one of the first that would respond if something kicked off in that part of the world. And so the operations tempo is very high. We worked 12 to 15-hour days on the regular, and is also a seed squadron, which means suppression of enemy air defenses. Essentially, we would be the ones to go in, get targeted by surface to air missiles from whichever country we're entering, attempt to not get shot down by them so that we can identify where they're located and we can shoot our missiles back and take them out to clear the airspace for the people coming in with the bombs behind us.
Wow.
No
So,
pressure at all.
yeah, you're bait essentially. I mean, you're armed bait. Like, you're not defenseless.
You're still bait, though.
You're bait. Yeah. When that mission was first developed, there was, I think it was a Wizzo on a bomber, and they explained what their mission was, and he was like, "You gotta be shitting me." So now, like, the unofficial motto of Seed Squadrons is YGBSM. Like, we all have little shoulder patches that say that because we're like, this is why we're here. But that mission specifically is super technical because there's so much you have to understand about all the enemies, different systems, their ranges, their altitudes, what frequencies they operate in, how they can detect you, how you can detect them. And that's just one mission. You also have air to air, like dogfighting or shooting missiles beyond visual range. You have air to ground, close air support, weaponeering on all this arsenal of weapons. Like, I can't overstate how complicated it is beyond just flying the airplane. So that was a long way to say that's when I started to struggle because it was overwhelming. You get there, you've done well in all the programs leading up to that point, or you wouldn't have gotten a fighter. And so I kind of compare it to being the valedictorian in your high school class and then getting into Harvard. And then you get to Harvard and you're like, everyone here is exceptional.
Yeah.
Now
Yep.
I'm just average.
I guess everyone that has that big fish, small pond, eventually when you graduate, this is when things become very overwhelming when you're just not that special anymore.
100%. And I think me personally, I had really attached my identity to my achievements, right? Like I was the straight A student. Got the college scholarship. I got the fighter jet against the odds. And I was just used to getting all this positive feedback from my family, from my peers, from my instructors. So to get there and be what in hindsight was a very average brand new F-16 wingman rocked my world. It was the first time I had really faced adversity and failed at things, and I just hadn't built that resilience yet. And so it took a lot of failing, feeling really bad about myself, doubting if I should be where I was at, considering if I could walk away from this career because that like feeling of failure felt so bad to me, and then crawling my way back from it multiple times to realize like, oh, that's normal when you're a beginner at something difficult.
So, I mean, what did you dig deep? How did you find that energy to push beyond the doubt and potentially the, I guess, the failures when you weren't nailing something on the first attempt?
Yeah, not in a very healthy way at first. I got better at that with time, but I think early on, especially those first 3 years in Japan, there's a lot of, like, jockeying for position with young fighter pilots in a squadron, the lieutenants, the captains. There's egos, there's trying to prove yourself. They're your friends, but you also wanna be better than them.
It's all the Top Gun cliche stuff. That's for real.
Some of it, when you're young and immature, yes. But you'll rapidly see that the people that are instructors, the people that have been there for an assignment or 2, that goes away for most people. They don't have that feeling where they need to prove themselves anymore, and they're just good at their jobs, and they're just confident in their abilities, so they're like, "Cool, I don't need to over communicate that to anyone because it's just demonstrated when I go fly." Where when you're, 25 years old and you're in this type A fighter pilot culture, you do feel like people who come across as very confident are kind of accepted and rewarded for that behavior. And so you feel like you have to put on that persona. And so during that time, I think the only reason I kept going is because I felt so much shame would be associated with quitting that the aversion to feeling that was stronger than the aversion to the struggle that I was going through. So neither felt great, but the scale was just slightly tipped to forging ahead.
So you spent 3 years in Japan. Just out of curiosity, you go by the nickname Mace. So when did your identity evolve from Michelle Curran to Mace? Was it there, or was that in the next chapter in your career?
Yeah, so I got my call sign in Japan, and we can go through that story. But then I think I more became comfortable with like being Mace and being Michelle being the same thing at my next assignment. Like I became more authentic then, but I'm sure you want to hear the call sign story.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Right, we can't just brush past that. Like
No, no.
yeah, so and this is I think part of what sent me into that spiral of self-doubt, feeling like imposter, all the things. So I get to Japan, I do one pretty easy flight, local area orientation. It's just fly around and like point out things, get used to the Japanese air traffic controllers' accents on the radio, find the visual references for the pattern, look at the airspace. It's like that kind of thing. It's like, welcome, let me show you around. My next flight was BFM, basic fighter maneuvering, which is what everyone would know as dogfighting. So training flight, no live weapons, and we have like canned setups. We're going out and I'm going to be offensive. So I am trying to get to my instructor 6 o'clock to shoot him with the gun. That's how I win. Go back to base and get to tell everyone that I shot whatever experienced instructor. So one thing I did not take into account, this was December in northern Japan, and the jet that I was flying there had a very powerful engine. I mean, all F-16s have powerful engines, but there's different blocks, different manufacturers, GE, Pratt and Whitney. The thrust is slightly different. So I had learned to fly the F-16 for the previous year in Arizona, mostly over the summer, in an aircraft with a little bit less thrust. Now I get to Japan, it's December, it's like 30 degrees outside on the ground, and I have a more powerful engine.
And the density altitude is in your favor.
Yes, that just performs way better. Young, dumb Michelle at this point, not Mace yet, does not take this into account with her dogfighting game plan. So at that point, you're just so inexperienced and so much happens so fast that the only way for your brain to kind of stay on top of things is to be very robotic. You're like, okay, I say this mantra in my head, like, AB, power, lift vector, pull, like you're very robotic with, I see this, I do this. I have no plan to deviate from that game plan, regardless of the engine and the temperature being different. So we start the fight. I know I'm supposed to light the afterburner, and in Arizona, I could just go full AB and leave it there. That's good to go. Don't need to worry about the throttle. I can focus on all these other things. I wait a little bit, roll, pull, try to point at my instructor. I did that. I roll, I pull. I immediately hit 9 Gs, so 9 times the force of gravity, which is normal in the F-16. Like, I'd done that in
Okay.
training.
You got the flight suit on there, the G suit. So
Get
I
the
guess
G
that's
suit.
what it's designed to do, right?
Yeah,
Squeeze
thank
the
God
blood
for the G
back
suit.
into your body. Yeah.
It's still like fight for your life.
Yeah.
You are working very hard with the G strain, doing the little air exchanges, flexing your muscles. Anyone that doesn't know anything about it can Google 9 Gs on YouTube, and you will see plenty of people fighting for their life and G locking, and which is going unconscious from it, for a nice visual for you. I do that, and normally you would have, I don't know, a few seconds, maybe 5 seconds, 7 seconds of 9 Gs. But as you're max performing the jet at that point, it starts to lose energy. The airspeed drops some, and usually the sustainable Gs will decrease to like 7. 7 still sucks, but it's a lot better than 9. So that's kind of what I'm expecting to happen. And I'm just G straining my little heart out, pulling on the stick as hard as I can. And I'm looking through the top of my canopy because I'm in a 90-degree bank, right hand turn at this point. And I'm just not getting anywhere close to being able to point at my instructor to pull the trigger. And that's where I need to be pointed in lead of him just a little bit to be able to shoot him with this gun. So G straining. And then I start to get tunnel vision. Well, first a little bit of gray out, then tunnel vision, then complete light loss, as we would say, which means you're still awake because you can hear what's going on. You're aware of what's happening, but your vision is completely black. And that's from the G's pushing the blood out of your brain. So it's a big deal because there is only one pilot in the jet.
Yep. There's
And if
no
they're
backup plan
sleeping,
there.
bad things happen. Again, young, dumb, trying to prove myself. I don't adjust what I'm doing when that starts to happen. I just keep pulling because I'm like, oh, I'm almost there. I got to get him. Eventually, my instructor, who's, looking back at me, is like, something's not right. She should have fired, but she should be pointing straight at me. She's not. What's going on? So he calls knock it off, which is the brevity term for safety. He's like, something's going on. Let's end this. Calls knock it off. I can't see anything at this point, but I hear him. And so I pull back my left hand on the throttle. So I don't know if I went to idle or I went out of afterburner for sure, whatever.
What's your altitude at this point?
So we had a 10,000-foot floor. So I have plenty of altitude still. We're still above the floor. So we're probably a couple thousand feet above that. So that's not a concern yet, but it can rapidly become a concern if you fully G-lock. Because usually the jet will be going very fast at that point.
If you're pointed downward, yeah, yep. when you get into that, that's probably just a few seconds of pad you've got there, I assume.
Yeah, you lose altitude very quickly. So luckily I hear him pull back the throttle, the G's drop. my vision comes back. So we got on the edge of a G lock, but we came back from it. I was just like, what the hell just happened? Like, why is this so hard? How does anyone do this? I felt like I was clinging to consciousness. What is like, this can't be the normal operating method for this. Surely not everyone is experiencing this. So we land, we go to debrief, we look at our tapes, and what should have happened when I lit the afterburner is for the jet to get to about point 0.9 Mach. And then you roll, pull, momentarily hit 9 Gs, it slows down, you're able to point your instructor, kill him, all the good things. Uh, I, in those few seconds of lighting the afterburner before I rolled and started pulling, I quickly went past the Mach and was supersonic. So I am now like 1.1 Mach roll. It was 500 and some knots. I can't tell you exactly what it was. It was for sure over 500, which you didn't normally see. Roll, pull. The jet will just sustain 9 Gs forever at that airspeed. You, the soft human in the cockpit, are the limiting factor. And I did not recognize that airborne. I did not adjust my game plan for the difference in thrust available. And I didn't back off when I should have. It was like a bunch of classic errors of someone that's new, but could have had very serious repercussions. So a couple months later, when we had the naming ceremony for me, they named me Mock at Circle Entry for MACE.
Okay. There you
A
go.
circle entry is the turn circle that you're trying to enter to shoot the person. So, long story, it's a fun story to tell because most people who haven't firsthand experienced it are like, that's just such a cool story. But what I got out of it, being on the firsthand receiving end of it and sitting in the debrief, is I almost just killed myself because of my lack of judgment, lack of experience, and ego. And my instructor basically told me that. He did not mince words.
Hmm.
And that was just like a oh shit moment of
Yeah.
I failed. Everyone's going to know about it because I now have a call sign that's going to stick with me for the rest of my career and beyond. And it's something that was like, this is a very serious business you've chosen to pursue, which you can know conceptually, but you don't really know it until you have a close call.
Incredible. That is a wild story.
I've seen you speak, and every time I hear you tell it, it's just a little bit different in the way that I perceive it and understand it. And I'm just envisioning like Tom Cruise in the Maverick scene where he's like blacking out, going way too fast, and then everything just falls apart, right? And then now you kind of own that, right? Your name, your persona. You talk about how you have to kind of develop this secondary person essentially as Mace now. That's who you are in the military from here on out. But how do we parlay that into the Thunderbirds? You take ownership of your call sign, your new persona, and walk us through the process of how you get from A to B now and becoming a airshow pilot and inspiring millions.
Yeah, so the Thunderbirds was something that had always intrigued me. Like whenever it would get brought up in conversation, I would just like eavesdrop and be like, "Oh, who's applying?" And then when it was one-on-one with that person, I would be like, "What's the application process like?" But I would never tell anyone it was something I was actually interested in, and mostly because I didn't want the accountability around this thing that I at that time did not think I was good enough to do. So it seemed like the type of people that go fly for the Thunderbirds are just like different from me. But there was this assignment in between those two, which was absolutely transformational for me. I went from 3 years in Japan, moved to Fort Worth, Texas, to a new squadron. That squadron, not to get too much in the weeds with how the Air Force is structured, but it was a reserve unit. And so I was an active duty person tied to them. There were about 8 of us who were active duty, everyone else reservists. So many of them are part timers. A lot of them fly for the airlines in their time off as their second job. And most of them are older. So majors, lieutenant colonels, and above. So they're early to mid 30s, if not into their 40s. They have families. They have more priorities than just work. They're not trying to prove themselves. They're in the like already established, confident part of their career. And so the culture in that squadron was just so different than the first one I had started in. They were so welcoming. And when someone messed up, which just happens all the time because the job is hard, whether it's something big or something small, it was just openly talked about in the squadron. And the way it was talked about was not like gossip or trying to shame that person. It was just like, hey, so and so had this happen. It could have been really bad. It was kind of a near miss situation. This is what led up to it. Like, let's talk about it so no one else makes that mistake. That person would get up in front of the squadron. They would explain what had happened. And we did that in my first squadron, but the atmosphere was almost like that person's like running the gauntlet. Like, you got to get up there. It's almost like a punishment is getting up in front of the squadron. Where this other unit, it was like, this is how we learn.
It's almost like you ran it like an AA meeting. You
Right?
kind
Like,
of embraced your problems and shared it with everyone. It helped you grow.
for sure. And when everyone does that from the commander down, it just creates psychological safety where people don't try to hide mistakes, which makes you safer overall. It also allows them to feel like confident enough to go after bold opportunities, which was like the big thing for me. I realized when I left Japan, there were all these opportunities I had missed out on that were like glaringly obvious to me because it was something someone would be like, we need a mission commander for this thing, or we need someone to be the project officer for this trip the squadron's going on, or whatever. And I would know intellectually, this is something I should do. It's good for my career. I'll learn a bunch of new stuff. But I would get that like drop in my stomach of like, oh man, please don't pick me for that because that is an opportunity to fail in front of everyone. And so I get to Texas and I'm like, there is this gap between where I am right now and where I know I have the potential to be. And I just don't like feeling that way. I don't like feeling like I'm sandbagging it. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not who I am. And so I'm like, I'm going to start paying attention for those opportunities where I feel those conflicting emotions. I'm going to step back and be like, okay, what is my actual objective here? It's to learn and to grow and to get better at my job and to, get more confident as a person, and consciously recognizing those and being like, you're going to say yes when those things happen. And then actually doing it completely changed my career and my life. Because I went from being the person who was like, just okay, kind of in the background, to being the one that was like, yeah, I'll go do that thing. And I learned so fast because of that. And I created trust in myself very quickly. And so my confidence level just grew so quick. And over about 18 months, I would say, I wouldn't have even recognized myself, the person that left Japan, if I could look forward 18 months. And I got to deploy for the first time. That was a huge part of it because getting to actually go do the mission and do it successfully is like a huge boost of like, okay, this is why you're here. This is what it's all about. And then there were a few other things, but that kind of culminated in the end of my time in Texas. Already have a follow-on assignment to go to New Mexico and teach at the F-16 schoolhouse. I see an email that the Thunderbirds are hiring. And it is not the first email. It is, in fact, the last email being like, hey, dum-dum, if you haven't seen the first 3 we've sent out, applications are due next week. Here's the requirements. Air Force Personnel Center sent a lot of emails, and I may have not read all of them. So I think I missed the first few.
Well, you're
So,
kind of busy flying, so hopefully you get a pass on that.
yeah, there's a lot of email in general involved in being a fighter pilot. People are always disappointed to hear, but those were usually not priority ones. So it's just
Yeah,
like,
much
okay,
like those FBI agents, I guess you have to spend some time behind the desk.
yeah, paperwork. So I saw it, I met all the requirements, and I had that physical reaction of excitement and trepidation, and I recognized it, and I went to my boss, was like, "Hey, just saw this email." And I wish it was this like Hollywood moment where I like walk into his office and I'm like, "Sir, I want to apply to the Thunderbirds." That is not at all what it was like. He was like, we were friends. He was a great mentor. We had talked about career progression and all the things, and I had never once mentioned the Thunderbirds. And I already have this follow on assignment to go to Holloman. So I'm like, hey, I saw an email. The Thunderbirds are hiring. And then I just say, I just stopped talking. He's like, so do you want to apply? And again, it wasn't like, yes, sir. It was, I think so. And then I threw it back to him. And I like to tell this story, especially if people ask about this in Q&A or on a podcast, because he could have very rightfully so said, hey, you never mentioned this. The application deadline is like 5 business days away, and Holloman is expecting you. Why don't you talk to your next boss about this and apply next year? I would have totally been like, yes, sir. And he had every right to do that. Instead, he was like, I think you'd be perfect for this job. What can I do to help you get your application in? And we jumped through all the hoops over the next 5 days and submitted a 43-page application. And I ended up getting hired eventually.
This podcast, Ian and I always talk about mentorship and how important that is in business aviation. Go figure, it's important everywhere. And this
Oh
just
yeah.
sounds like a bullseye moment here of how important it is and how much you've evolved and grew while you were on assignment there in Texas and New Mexico to get to where you are today. That really is fantastic to hear a story like that.
And I think there were so many interactions like that happened in various ways where people like encouraged me to push myself a little bit. But that one was just so clear and it stands out. And my life would be so different if I had not applied and I had gone off to New Mexico, and who knows if I would have ever applied. I met my husband here on the assignment. Yeah, my life would just be completely different.
I mean, even what you've achieved so far was pretty amazing, and I'm sure you could pat yourself on the back. But at the trajectory that you were taking there and to live with that regret, that would have been something that probably would have been eating away at you. But still, applying for a spot on the Thunderbirds team doesn't mean you're going to make it. So why don't you talk to us about your next chapter?
Yeah. To close the loop on what you said about regret, one of the things I talk about in keynotes now is that people are 3 times more likely to regret things that they didn't do compared to things that they did do. And I often use that as a litmus test now when I make decisions. I'm like, will I regret not doing this? And I will be like 6 months from now, a year from now. It's just like a helpful takeaway I think people can use when they're facing big opportunities. But yeah, you apply, you put in that paper application, you wait a couple of months, and then you get a call out for semifinalist interviews. So there were 12 of us that got brought out on the road with the current team, went to an air show for a weekend, and there were 3 spots available. There was the right wingman number 3, the posing solo number 6, and then the narrator and the advanced pilot number 8. So 12 of us go out. That weekend is a lot of you learning what the job is like because it's not for everyone. And so they want you to understand what you're getting yourself into. But it's also the current team kind of getting to know you socially and seeing if people could tolerate being on the road 240 days a year with you. Like that's a big part of it, personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like personality conflicts are poison in the well when you're that small of a group of people together that frequently in a high pressure environment.
Ironically, I was in recruiting for parts of my career, and it's one thing I learned with job interviews anywhere. A big part of it is a personality litmus test because you're spending a lot of time with this person. And even if the person is qualified at the role, if there's a personality conflict, a culture misfit, that tends to backfire in the end as well. So clearly, you sounds like you made the cut. What happened next?
Yeah, so that weekend it's stressful, but it wasn't too bad. And then another couple months go by and I get called out for finalist interviews. Now there are 6 of us for those 3 spots. We go out to an air show weekend again, much of the same as the first one, but this time we have a 12-man interview and it is the current 12 officers in like a boardroom at an FBO or wherever we are on the road, and they're all sitting around the table. You walk in, you sit at the head of the table, and they all just ask you questions, interview questions. Very stressful. So we did that. And then you go home and you wait another couple months for a phone call. And so I think I got the call in July. So I had submitted my application in December. I think the first round of interviews were early that year, maybe like February, something like that. The next ones were in May. And then I got the call in July. And I'd just driven the airfield as like the morning supervisor of flying to make sure that the taxiways are clear, there wasn't any FOD or anything. And I just left the controlled movement area and my phone rings and I see it's the executive officer for the Thunderbirds. So I pull over, put my flashers on, answer it. And as soon as I say hello, all I hear is like speakerphone of 12 people screaming congratulations.
That's awesome. That's great.
That's
And I
great.
They
knew I
want the
made it.
opposite
Yeah.
the opposite track of your colleagues back in Japan. So there's no messing with you on this one here. They just
No, they
dove
did
right
not
in.
mess with me. And then I was like, this is awesome. I was like, wait, what number am I? Like, what position are you hiring me for? Because that is quite the different experience if you're a wingman, a solo, or the narrator. And they will ask you in the interview if you could pick which position you would pick. And I had said a solo, but a lot of it doesn't come down to what you want. It comes down to where they think you'll be best. And
Yeah.
then they told me I gotten hired as number 6, the posing solo.
So cool.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I know the mentorship and then learning from other people where you're going to fit and what you can accomplish with that support means a lot more than trying to figure it all out on your own. I want to make sure that we kind of call back the fact that without these people behind you that you learned from and helped push you and talk you into doing some of this, you would not be here, right? So that's fantastic that every step of the way is a new learning experience and developing some other tool or something else for you to continue to use even to this day. Let's talk about some of the fun stuff, right? So this podcast is generally a lot of personal stories and development growth, but we're talking to a flippin' fun Thunderbird pilot. So let's dig into like what it's like flying inches away from another jet at hundreds of miles per hour. Where's the emotion, the adrenaline? What does that kind of do for you as you're out there in the sky doing these crazy maneuvers?
Yeah, it changes over time. When you are brand new, adrenaline is high a lot, right? Because you are just overwhelmed, task saturated. We like to say you have a helmet fire, right? Like your brain is just maxed out. There would be smoke coming out of your ears if it could. And we start with a building block approach. So when you show up as a solo, especially, but also as, a wingman that's going to fly in the diamond, which is what we call numbers 1 through 4, you are going out with one other aircraft. You're starting almost in like a chase formation, and you're like just walking it in to like visually see the references for our different positions. And then they're like, okay, let's do a loop. And you're so far away. Like it's ridiculous. You're ridiculously far away. And you're
It's
like,
got to
oh,
feel
okay,
unnatural, right? As you get closer and closer and closer,
for
like
sure.
this can't be right. Yeah.
And you start getting closer, and then you do that same thing with a roll, and you will have an instructor in your back seat will fly a D model, a 2-seat model for those early rides, and that person will literally take the controls and save your life again and again and again until you eventually get to the spot where they don't have to intervene. And the first time you stay in position roughly for a loop and a roll and your instructor doesn't touch the controls feels like a massive victory, because like we're all experienced fighter pilots, so we're used to being fairly proficient by that point, and it is quite the change to be a beginner again and doing flying that is so different from any flying you've done in your career. The stick and rudder skills are hard. Like, I had one of the guys that was in my squadron in Texas who was a weapons school graduate, which is our version of Top Gun, lieutenant colonel, had been in the Air Force for over 20 years, and I talked to him maybe like 4 months after I got to the Thunderbirds, and he asked how it was going, and I was like, "It's way harder than I thought it was going to be." And he was like, "Really? Like, it's loops to music. How hard could it be?" I was like, "Dude, I can't even explain how hard it is. Like, the timing of the slightest ease on the stick with the shift from right rudder to left rudder with and also you have so many other people that are part of this equation, right? If their timing is slightly different that day, that affects you. It just takes thousands of reps to get good at it, to get to the point what you see in an air show.
Is there a pressure, between you and the Blue Angels? I'm sure there's some terrific, healthy rivalry,
Rivalry.
but I still believe that you're considered the top aerobatics team in the world. Is there a pressure to keep pushing the envelope to do more intense, show-worthy maneuvers?
I think when I showed up, it was actually the opposite because the team had come off of several mishaps over the last like 5 years. We had a fatality in 2018. We had a jet go off the end of the runway, I think the year before that or 2 years before that. There were just several like big mishaps where people were like, what's going on with the Thunderbirds? And they were all caused for different reasons, but there was a lot of spotlight. And my boss, who got hired the same time I did and was Thunderbird 1 for the whole 3 years that I was there, I think initially he was told, like, we need you to bring this team back together. The team cannot have another mishap. Like, it is at risk of like the team being, taken away. Like,
Disbanded, yeah.
yeah, because something's weird's going on. And so I think our first year was very much him getting his footing. I mean, all of us that were new were getting our footing and kind of coming back from just a dark period that the team had been in. But then COVID happened, and of course, we're an air show team with no air shows. So we did the America Strong flyovers where we flew over a bunch of cities, which was a whole animal in itself. But on the backside of that, we had a lot more downtime than we normally would because there is just no blank space in the team's schedule. It is training season. All the new people are trying to learn their roles. You're barely getting there in time to hit the road for air shows. And then it is air show every single week for 9 months. So there's not even really time to think about changing maneuvers or, you know, whether that's switching the order of them or bringing in new maneuvers. There's just not the bandwidth to do that. But because of that lull, we redid the demo in 2020. And it was the first time in decades. Like small stuff had been changed, but no one had like ripped it apart and rebuilt it from the ground up. And a lot of the same maneuvers were still in there. We did add some new ones. We changed the order. Number 4 at the time, his dad was retired from Disney, and he had actually been in charge of the live performances at Disney World. And so he was super smart on the viewer experience and how to take an audience on an emotional journey and how to keep their attention. And so he worked with us to make this new show almost like themed segments of like in your face shock and awe, lots of afterburner, and then like grace and beauty with the delta flying together, these loops and these rolls, and make the music reflect that. And the show that people see now is growing from that time. It's, been refined over the last few years, but it is, I think every person I've talked to, it is way better. It's really just changed for the better in so many ways. And not that our team was just exceptionally talented, it's that we were given the opportunity to do that and we took advantage of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But what a perfect confluence of events here that have that kind of someone to bring in that Disney showmanship, that entertainment aspect, that emotional journey to pull that into the show, which I like, I guess, as you imagine, there has been kind of set in stone for so many years. I mean, that's kind of like a really happy accident. But you mentioned how things got very serious and very real, and there were some tragedies involved. So this is not all fun and games. This is very, very, very real, this experience. So what was the most intense or meaningful moment that you had during your time on the team?
I had a lot of intense moments. Is I guess what my threshold for intense moments was when I got hired. If you were to use that as the litmus test, it was like a daily occurrence. When you're flying just a couple of feet from another airplane and you're upside down, there's 6 of you and you're on the end of the whip as a solo because, there's the boss, there's the wingman, and then there's you. So every move that the boss makes is like bigger by the time it gets to you. The number of times that I had the like, oh shit feeling or like your whole body tenses up and you're like, oh, and you like quickly rudder away. I mean, that happened all the time. But you just get
During
so
training,
used
I
to it.
assume, or during the actual shows?
I'd say it was less as you got experienced team, but it would still happen if you hit wake turbulence or if you hit wind shear or like there's just like little things that would happen occasionally. You are flying over a mountainous show site and it's just bumpy and the boss hits a bump and it ripples down the formation and all of a sudden you get a very close jet next to you, like closer than it's supposed to be. Your survival instinct has been dulled down substantially through repetition and exposure. So stuff that would have just freaked me out to the point where I would have not been able to get back in formation in the past was normal. But then there's like the above and beyond, like things are really going wrong. And I had, I think, 2 occurrences of that on the team. One where I hit a vulture during an airshow practice, which was, it was in Colombia, the country. So we're in a foreign country, very large birds there, turns out, and no chance to avoid it. I'm at like 450 knots, 2,000 feet above the ground, just see a flash of black, feel the jet like shudder from the impact and know that it's a bad day. Ended up landing fine from it, put 2 fist-sized holes through the side of the outside of the intake. So, like, under essentially, like, my left hip. They were on the curved part of the intake under the cockpit. There were
Ooh,
holes
that's
through the
close.
outside.
So you almost ingested it.
And the wing of the bird, because I had a GoPro. running. So it's like spread eagle facing my jet that I could see on the GoPro afterwards before impact. And so I think its left wing went into the intake because they did bore scope the engine and found feathers in there and we had to swap it out. But then the bulk of the bird, the heavier part, cartwheeled along the outside and put those two holes through it. So based on the fact that it like literally cookie cutter punched fist size holes through the side of that metal, I have no doubt had I ingested the whole thing that I would have been engine out.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I assume you've never punched out, right? That was, I guess, as close as it came.
Yep, that is the only time that I've had any experience where I'm like, if something had gone slightly differently, I would have gotten to test out the ejection seat, which is not something I wanted to have in my.
No, you only want to do that once, if at all, right? You never want to try and
Probably zero.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, no.
zero. I already was struggling with back pain from all the G's, so the last thing I needed was the 30 instantaneous G's or whatever you experience when you pull the
Compress
ejection.
your
So,
spine. Yeah.
yeah, I'll be
Yeah.
shorter.
So, listen, you've done a lot to show us that you know how to lead under pressure. Is that innate, or is that something that you learned?
Definitely learned. I was a very quiet, shy, introverted kid who didn't even want to be called on in class, hated getting up in front of it, hated being put on the spot, probably had mild social anxiety, like all the things. I get to ROTC, I have to fight through that to some extent because you are forced to get in front of your class. I would do okay at prepared presentations because my self-doubt forced me to over prepare. So I actually did well on those because I was like I'd practiced it 100 times, right? Like I could nail my 5-minute presentation in class. But more of like the dynamic, even something super basic in the military, like commanding a formation that's marching, which we didn't really do on active duty, but you do that in like our equivalent of boot camp. It's just a great way to test people's confidence under pressure. That was terrifying to me. And I think going through that time in Japan and just constantly being forced outside my comfort zone, being forced to eventually become a flight lead, brief formations, eventually become an instructor, teach students, all of that was constantly ripping that band-aid off. And when I did it okay or didn't massively fall on my face, I was like, oh, I didn't die. I guess we could do it again. And eventually those things that are just excruciatingly uncomfortable become normal. And that threshold for what you feel like you can't do just goes up and up and up until one day you're the lead solo for the Thunderbirds. That took over a decade, but it took just countless moments of a split second of courage to like do the thing. And then once you're already doing the thing, now you got to sink or swim. And I think most of us are very motivated to swim. And so you just prove to yourself over and over. And it doesn't have to be day one, apply to the Thunderbirds, right? It's like little things at first, but they compound over time.
You're not currently flying with the Thunderbirds, a limited role, what, 2, 3 years typically, and then they kind of swap out, new pilots come and go, give other people the experience. But for you, what was it like stepping away from that after such a high profile role and then, into what you went on to next after that?
Yeah, I get asked all the time why I would leave when I did. I think it's a hard thing from an outside perspective to understand. And what you said is true. Normally, the assignment is 2 years long because it is just really intense. It is hard on your family. It is hard on your body. It is hard to be on as a public figure all of the time for that long, right? You're like a character at Disney World. You have to be Cinderella, even if you're hungry and the sun's in your eye, right? Like you have to smile and shake hands and take pictures, and you can't have a bad day. Because of COVID, the team I was on got asked to stay for a third year because that just disrupted the team's experience for the people that was their first year. It disrupted the hiring process, all the things. So I ended up there for 3 years. By the end of that, a lot of stuff had changed for me from the time I had applied and gotten hired to the team. I met my husband the first year on the team here in Vegas, which is where the team is based, where I still live. He had a son, so I now had a stepson who was 6 years old at the time. So I now have other people to take into consideration with my career decisions. I mentioned briefly back pain. Around the start of my first show season, after 4 months of working out every morning at 5 a.m. and pulling 9Gs multiple times a day. Sometimes during training season, we would fly 10 times a week, and all of those flights were doing the maneuvers. So high G, mentally and physically demanding. I started to get chronic back pain that I dealt with the entire time I was on the Thunderbirds, but it was definitely the worst the first year as I was just trying to figure out how to navigate and mitigate it and all the things. So I was like getting signs that it probably wasn't best for my body to keep pulling 9Gs for another 7 years to make it to 20-year retirement. Like there's a cost. And then the last one, 3 years of that, the flying is the most fun flying I've done in my career, but it becomes pretty routine by that point, right? You have done it thousands of times. And I'm not saying like you still have to be very dialed in. Complacency is a huge issue when you're experienced on the team, but you lose that feeling of just excitement over getting in the jet every day. And what became my favorite part of the job over time were these moments I got to have with individuals, with people where I got to see inspiration happen. And some of the most memorable for me are with little girls. I was the only woman flying for the team for the 3 years I was there. And there's just a unique ability you have to connect with kids when they see someone that looks like them doing something that they did not think that they could do, or they did not think people like them could do until that moment they see you. And when that light bulb moment happens and you're looking at this 7 or 8 year old and you see her connect the dots and that what she sees as possible for her in the world just got bigger and you got to give that gift to her, that was the coolest thing I got to do in the entire time I was on the team. And I love that so much. I was like, how can I keep doing this? I like putting on the blue suit, being part of this incredible team with this legacy, working with so many other just high performing, exceptional people was such an honor. But I knew there were so many individual experiences that I had had, the call sign story being an example, that other people could really learn from.
Yeah.
And I had been asked many times throughout my time on the Thunderbirds to speak at events, and I always had to say no because you don't have the time. You can't be paid. It's a conflict of interest. And so someone asked me when I was on my third year if I would speak at an event the following year. It was after my time on the team was ending. I was kind of playing with going to the airlines, but that didn't really get me excited. And so that person being like, hey, what do you speak about? What do you charge? All the things that was like, well, I could actually say yes to this. Let me look like, what is this industry about? How does it work? And I was like, oh my gosh, I could run my own business, telling my story in a way that feels super authentic to me, in a way that feels very rewarding, like I'm delivering value to people. And it just seems so obvious that it was the right fit at the right time. And so it took that leap of faith, and here we are 3.5 years later almost, and it's going strong.
That's awesome. Kind of a side question before we move on. You said that you were the only female pilot during your tenure. How many have there been? Were you the first? 3 or 4 years later, I'm sure there's other women that have stepped up to continue to carry that mantle, help inspire those young girls and women as well.
For sure, yeah. So the first was Fifi Malakowski in 2005 is when she got hired. And then Combo Weeks was quickly after her. So there was a year where there were two. There was one a wingman that was a woman and one solo that was a woman. And that was like the first round. And then there was a third after them. And then there was a 5 year gap where there were none. And then there was me. So I was the fourth to fly in the demo. There was also a female number 8 narrator advanced pilot in there. So the fifth, if you don't talk flying in the demo specifically, the fifth. And the team had been around since 1953. So
Yeah.
not a lot of us, but it's been really cool since I left. For anyone that's seen the Thunderbird Netflix documentary, they saw Threat, who I actually went to college with. So that was a small world. But she was hired right after me, did her couple of years on the team. There was a 1 year break. And then right now, number 6, who, when this airs, will be wrapping up her first season, moving to number 5 next year. Her call sign is Rogue. So she's the 7th. So it's becoming more common. Considering the Blue Angels, Amanda Lee, who also great friend of mine, she's amazing. She was the first a couple years ago, and it's still just been her. So we are excited that when, little girls come to air shows, they get to see themselves. In any other squadron, it doesn't matter. Like tactical mission, who cares? You just need to be good at your job. But in a squadron that is out there trying to recruit, retain, and inspire, which is the team's message and the team's mission, you are better at doing that when you represent the population you're trying to recruit, retain, and inspire.
Awesome. I know that business aviation and aviation in general struggles with getting women involved and elevating them to new positions and new roles. It kind of starts where you're at because you're inspiring these little kids to jump in and maybe want to do that, whether they become an airline pilot, a corporate pilot, or an Air Force pilot. It at least puts that thought in their heads. And it doesn't surprise me that the Air Force was ahead of the Navy in that a little bit. My uncle will kill me because he was a seaman for far too many years. Sorry, Brian. I'm an Air Force geek, even though I never joined any branch of the military. But he'd kick my ass if he knew that. So, uh,
It's a friendly
yeah,
rivalry.
But Michelle, I think we'd be remiss here if so. Obviously, that led you down the road of public speaking, but you also wrote a book. Why don't you
Yeah.
tell us about that?
Yeah. So when this airs, my, I guess, debut nonfiction book will be about to release. It comes out September 9th. It's called The Flip Side: How to Invert Your Perspective and Turn Fear into Your Superpower. And I think what we talked about today gives you a good preview about what the book hits on. Every chapter takes a story from the cockpit or from life in general. Many of them are high stakes. The bird strikes in there, the call sign stories in there, but those are just a couple. So those types of stories. But then I think what's most important is that I pull either the tools that the Air Force had already taught me that helped me navigate that situation successfully, or what I learned because of it, and tie it back to human psychology. There's a lot of studies in there. There's a lot of information pulled from experts in that field, since I am not one, to kind of be like, this is why this works. And then all of those tools are broken down into frameworks that anyone can use, whether that's in the cockpit or it's in any sort of challenge in life. It's really gives you a framework to flip how you view fear, take those bold actions like I talked about, overcome self-doubt. There's a lot about focusing on what you can control and how you can respond when things go bad rather than react, to respond in a productive way that kind of doesn't make things worse and keeps you moving towards your goals and doesn't just like crush your confidence. So I've been working on this thing for 3 years, and the fact that we were almost there is almost surreal to me. So I am 95% super excited for September 9th, 5% terrified, but I think that's normal. And I really think that a lot of people are going to be entertained and intrigued by the fighter pilot stories, but more people are going to find it relatable and actionable, and they'll see themselves in the stories.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this book, you will be signing it at base, correct? There is a business aviation connection to all of this.
Yeah, yeah. So pre-orders are open right now, and pre-orders mean, I can't overemphasize this. I don't want to go down this whole, I don't want to step on my soapbox and go on about pre-orders, but they determine the success of the book to so much extent. They determine who makes bestseller lists like the New York Times, which I like to set audacious goals. So going for that.
It's worked for you
Um,
in the past.
it has in the past. This one is tough. I am doing everything I can. As long as the 9th happens, and if I don't make it, I know I've done everything I can. I will be happy about that situation. But if anyone thinks they'll ever order a book, I will be at base doing several signings. So you could bring your book with you. I'll be doing some panels as well, so you might see me there. Feel free to stop me and I'll sign it. But don't wait until then to order. If you order by September 13th, it counts for all of those things I mentioned, and I would just be very grateful if you did it sooner rather than
Oh
later.
yeah, everybody needs to go order one of these. I'm excited to dig in and read more about the stories we talked about today in broader terms. Everybody else should go order one as well, right?
And they can find it all major book retailers. Just search my name or the title. It pops up Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Target, all the places.
Awesome.
All right, Mace, this is a big moment right here, obviously, with this book coming up. But just have to ask you anyway, since we're on the show, what's next? Do you have anything bigger planned ahead?
This is funny because I feel like every time someone's like, "Oh, are you going to write a second book?" or like, "What are you going to work on next?" I'm like, Right now, when you ask me that, that's like asking someone who's 9 months pregnant when they're gonna have another baby. 'Cause I'm just like, uh, uh, no, I
Too
mean,
soon, in other
yeah,
words.
Yeah,
speaking is the bulk of my business, and, having a successful book and a book that people really gain value from and resonate with can elevate you onto bigger stages where you can have a bigger impact. And so I want to get this in front of more people. I love talking to the aviation industry and to people who already read military nonfiction. I think there are so many people out there who are not in those industries that would really benefit from this message and this book. And when I think about like who I'm writing to, it is that 35-year-old mom who's been out of the workforce for 5 years who had a kid and is needs to come back and is filled with all this fear and self-doubt because she's taken this career break and who has no tie to the military or aviation, right? Or it's this 55-year-old who's contemplating retirement and doesn't know what their identity is going to be. And so my goal, to answer your question, is to have a bigger impact, and I think the book is the vehicle to do that, and that's one of the primary reasons I wrote it.
that's awesome. Looking forward to getting a copy, reading it, obviously, hopefully seeing you in other speaking engagements. So, if people need to get a hold of you to book that, we'll have some info in the notes, and I know we'll get into some more detail on that. But I do want to ask before we kind of wrap everything up, but if you had to give advice to someone who's stuck in aviation or in life, what is that one little nugget that you could offer them right now?
Yeah, and you've probably heard me say this on the keynote stage, and I think it's just such a succinct but helpful piece of advice. So, the key to progress is having the courage to start something, even when you don't feel ready, but believing yourself enough to know you will figure it out along the way. That is what
Fantastic.
so many people get stuck because they think there's going to be this magic moment where they wake up and they're like, I suddenly feel confident. The fear is suddenly gone. But that's not how it works. You have to take action, and that creates confidence.
Yeah, don't let analysis paralysis kill you, or
Yes.
fear of failure stop you from trying. I think that's a very powerful message. I love that.
Mace, I really want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your insight with our audience. You teased the book fantastic. I am going to put my name on that list, and I do love military nonfiction. So, if this was just a little taste of what's to come, I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of it.
Awesome. Thank you. This has been a fun conversation, and thanks for the opportunity to share my story.
Absolutely. Thank you.
From pushing the limits in the cockpit to inspiring people around the world, Mace's story is a powerful reminder that fear doesn't have to be a stop sign. It can also be a launch pad. For our listeners who want to learn more or connect with Mace, visit her website at macecurran.com. We'll be sure to leave that link in the show notes. And if you enjoyed today's show, don't forget to like and follow us on your favorite podcast platform and share this episode with a colleague or friend. Your review or feedback is greatly appreciated and helps us spread the word. We will see you all next week with a new episode of The Crosscheck.